On today's show, we're looking at the Rangers' internal free agents. Who needs to come back? Who needs to go? And where does this team stand in terms of their payroll when all that's said and done? All that and more on this episode of Locked On Rangers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Rangers, your daily Texas Rangers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked onto the World Series champion Texas Rangers. I'm Bryce Patrick, a cripplingly addicted Texas Rangers fan covering this team for 11 seasons, including all 6 as the founder and host of this podcast. Thank y'all so much for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. If you're not already, you can follow me on Twitter at Bryce Patrick. You can follow the show at Locked On Rangers. Hit subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform and on YouTube, where the best way you can help grow the show is to comment nearly any single thing below. Now, before we get into some Rangers internal free agents, a little bit of talk about last night's postseason game in the ALCS and some Rangers coaches who might be managers elsewhere next season. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks. Run your game. Now, last night in the ALCS, it was a thrilling back and forth matchup between the Yankees and the Gardos. The reason that I bring this up is because not only am I bummed that I missed it, spending time with my friends and not watching baseball. What a colossal mistake by me. Instead, coming back to watch the boring NLCS game, where there's a little bit of a reminder of a certain game in last postseason. Game 1 of the World Series. One of the most epic games in the history. Actually, in my opinion, the best game of baseball that's ever been played by anyone, ever. But the game last night between the Guardians and the Yankees reminded me of that game because of the back and forth nature, because of the 2 glorious home runs hit by the Guardians. This was a close back and forth game. The Guardians with the best bullpen we've seen in years and years and years. Emmanuel Clase, one of the best relief seasons we've seen in so long. But a couple, actually 3 now, massive home runs that he has given up in spots where he just never did anything like that in the regular season. I mean, 5, I believe it's actually 6 now earned runs that he has given up in the postseason, only 5 all regular season. Last night, the Guardians were leading, gave up a game-tying home run to Aaron Judge, and then followed up with a go-ahead home run by Giancarlo Stanton. The Gardos were down to their last out. They were down 2 runs, and in comes Jhonkensy Noel for a pinch hit, 2 out in the bottom of the 9th inning, game-tying home run. One of the best calls I've ever seen on a home run. His nickname is Big Christmas. And the announcer, I forget his name. I'm so sorry to the TBS announcer, who's been incredible all postseason long, talking about it being the greatest Christmas present that could ever be left under a tree. And then Grapevine native David Fry, an all-star, Grapevine native David Fry, hitting the game-winning walk-off home run in extra innings. It reminded me a little bit of Game 1 with Corey Seager tying it with 1 swing, and then an epic celebration and a extra inning walk-off home run in one of the final rounds of the postseason, like Adolis Garcia. Not quite. A little bit more you knew it off the bat with David Fries than you did with Adolis Garcia, that just kept going and going and going. Just an epic game of baseball. It reminds me why I love the postseason so much, and it's so much less stressful watching it without any real rooting interest, because I don't really particularly care for any of the teams left, but I just want some good freaking baseball. But there was some news that came out over the last couple of days about the Rangers coaching staff. There are a few managerial vacancies, including one with the Chicago White Sox, coming off of one of the worst seasons we've ever seen any baseball team ever have. Ever. Truly horrific season. Pedro Grifol was just a terrible choice at manager. Never had the room at all. Did not get the vibe of this is a bad team and I need to manage it like a bad team, and was fired after a historic, I believe it was 23 game losing streak. It was a lot of games in a row. Maybe it was 26, But anyway, there is an opening there, and there are a couple of Rangers coaches that are candidates to fill that spot, including Donnie Eckert, the Rangers bench coach slash offensive coordinator. He is a big part of the reason why the Rangers had such an incredible offense last year coming over from the San Francisco Giants. He has been in Texas for now 3 seasons. He's there a year before Bruce Bochy. And then Will Venable, who has been here, I believe, 2 seasons. He is the Rangers, I believe, associate coach. He's not the bench coach. He's not, maybe he's the associate manager. I forget his actual title. It's a title that we don't often see. I think there's only one other doing what Will Venable is doing in Texas in terms of his specific role. But both those guys have been granted permission to speak to the White Sox about the open managerial position, which before the news of Jerry Reinsdorf, who is the White Sox owner, considering selling the team, he is one of the worst owners in the sport, right up there in the big 3 of horrendous owners. John Fisher is clearly taking that cake right now as the A's owner. Artie Moreno with the Angels is low-key one of the also horrendous owners in this sport. And Jerry Reinsdorf is also up there. Those are the unholy trinity of terrible owners. And since he is looking to sell, maybe he will be less involved. There will be an owner that actually tries to, get a team that wins and isn't actively terrible. So maybe it won't be a horrible situation to become a manager. Will Venable has been low-key viewed as the Rangers' kind of heir apparent to Bruce Bochy. Bochy's deal, he signed a 3-year deal to come out of retirement, won the World Series in 2023, disappointed in 2024, and his contract is up after 2025. He is a little bit on the older side. I believe he is 69 now, which is a nice age. Yes, he turns 70 on April 16th. So he still has that flair for managing, still has that fire for managing. Right now, his career managerial record has now slipped below 500. I think it was a little bit below that even when he did first retire. He's at 2,171 wins, 2,185 losses. So if the Rangers have like a 90-ish, 95 win season, I think that would get him back with a winning record for his career. I don't think that's something that he is thinking about. If the Rangers do win the World Series in 2025, maybe there's a chance he goes out on top. I think the most likely scenario for Bruce Bochy to stay, I thought initially when he signed, he would be here 3 years and then done. But if he still has the fire for it, if he's still, loving it, he still feels like he can physically do it, then maybe it will be longer. And maybe it will be too long for Will Venable to want to wait around and be the heir apparent to take over as the Rangers manager when Bruce Bochy retires. Not entirely sure. I thought Donnie Eckert might be a candidate for that as well. Obviously, there's only one of these will possibly get this job. There are still other candidates as well. And if I were in their shoes, I'd rather be in the Rangers situation of being a part of a winning team, a good, culture. There are other managerial openings I still believe that are out there, and maybe there will be more in the coming weeks. But that's something definitely to keep an eye on, because those guys are a big part of the Rangers and how they are, functioning next year and moving forward. And I think it's something that's interesting to keep an eye on. And if Bruce Bochy does want to stick around for longer than just the 3 years, I think that the Rangers will have to find a next manager in waiting, because I think there are a lot of teams out there that are really high on Will Venable, including Cleveland and the Mets wanted him to interview last year when they had managerial openings. He declined because the Rangers were in the middle of the postseason run. And now both those teams are in their respective league championship series. There are only 30 managerial spots. So these opportunities don't come along all that often. But I think these guys will be considered for manager openings for the next few years. So it's definitely something to keep an eye on. Coming up, we're going to talk about these Rangers internal candidates, internal free agents. We're going to start with the starting pitchers, because I think those guys are the most important to what the Rangers are going to do moving forward. Some relievers, a couple of bats, and just if the Rangers have to prioritize a couple, who should they prioritize bringing back? Talk about all that and more right after this word from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by Hims. Your sex life is important, but your schedule is busy. You don't have time to go to a doctor's office to get treated for ED. Through Hims, you can get a personalized ED treatment without stepping foot outside your door. Hims is changing men's healthcare by providing you with access to affordable sexual health treatments from the comfort of your couch. The process is 100% online, so there's no need for uncomfortable doctor's visits. No insurance is needed, and one low price covers everything from treatments to ongoing care. With hundreds of thousands of trusted subscribers, Hims can help you find the ED treatment that works for you. Start for your free trial on your free online visit today at hims.com/lockedon. That's HIMS.com/lockedon for your personalized ED treatment options. hims.com/lockedon. The products mentioned are chewable compound products which are not approved or verified for safety or effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for details and important safety information. Subscription required. Price varies based on product and subscription plan. Shout out to the Everydayers for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. Next week, I'll be back on Monday talking about a big picture overview, what the Rangers need, what should they prioritize, what is going to be most important to them this offseason in free agency and trades and all kinds of other stuff going on this winter. Now, without further ado, let's get into the Rangers starting pitchers that are free agents at this point. The Rangers have 3 different guys that have been part of this rotation this year and parts of last year, starting with Max Scherzer, Andrew Heaney, and Nathan Eovaldi. Now, here are the contracts they are projected to sign their market value according to Spotrac. Scherzer projected for 1 year, $15.2 million. Andrew Heaney, 2 years, $21.6 million. That's $10.8 million per year. Nathan Eovaldi, 2 years, $49.7 million total. That's $24.9 million average annual value. He also has a vested player option for $20 million next season if he so chooses to exercise that. I don't think he will. Pretty darn sure he is going to opt out and sign a bigger and longer deal because he has been pretty darn good for the Rangers. Now, let's start with age before beauty. So Max Scherzer, coming off of a very injury-plagued season, projected at $15 million. The number, it seems fine. It seems reasonable. I think that Max Scherzer can bounce back. Next year will be his age 40 season. He's a guy who has been very, very healthy, but with the back injury, with the age, I just don't think there's a scenario where it really makes sense for the Rangers to bring Scherzer back. I know they like Scherzer. I think Scherzer is a great guy in the clubhouse. I mean, his intensity, his meticulousness, his attention to detail. I mean, his intensity, again, he is just such a competitor. It was such a presence in that Rangers locker room. What he did down the stretch in those 8 starts after the trade deadline in 2023, that cannot be understated, his importance. The Rangers do not make the playoffs without Max Scherzer. Now, could they have used more from him this year? Absolutely. Yeah, they really could have. They really needed more from Max Scherzer this year, not just in terms of him, being Cy Young caliber Max Scherzer or even All-Star caliber Max Scherzer. He was just needed more starts. The Rangers needed more from him, and they didn't get it. And maybe he bounces back next year. Maybe he pitches something close to 100, 150 innings in his age 40 season. I think that's entirely possible, but I don't think it's likely, and I don't think it's the best allocation of resources for the Rangers. I just don't see Max Scherzer coming back next season. In terms of Andrew Heaney, around $11 million per year for a starter who has been durable, who was, I think, better than a lot of people give credit for or realize last season and even in 2023 as well. This is a very important guy in this Rangers rotation. Just the health, the durability, the going out there every 5th day and keeping the Rangers in games wasn't spectacular, wasn't really terrible. He was just pretty solid. And in terms of starting pitchers and their health next year that the Rangers have on their roster and guys who they can count on to make 30 starts and around maybe 150 innings, he was at 160 last year. I don't think there's that many guys on there. So I'm not ruling out Heaney. He's a good clubhouse guy. I mean, the Rangers really, really like having him around. He is universally well liked and very well talked about. He's not going to be my top priority of guys for the Rangers to bring back, but he's definitely someone to keep an eye on, someone who I think someone else could make a more sizable offer, maybe more than 2 years. It's going to be heading into his age 34 season. So he is getting up there a little bit, but showing these last 2 seasons of durability where he has just not been very durable at all in his career, I think that's something that bodes well for him. And if the Rangers want to bring him back, of the guys who signed before the 2023 season, Heaney was the guy who I was least sure about his health. And yet over the last 2 seasons of those guys that they signed, whether it was, Eovaldi, whether it was DeGrom or Heaney. Heaney was the one that I was least sure was going to be healthy, and he has been the most healthy. So that's something I think definitely the Rangers will be considering, but I don't think they're top priority. But Nathan Eovaldi projected for that 2-year, just under $50 million. I think that I would love for him to just sign that vesting option, just go with the 1-year deal. He is going to be heading into his age 35 season, coming off of a pretty good but not spectacular 2024 season. He was much better in the first half before the All-Star break than he was after it, making 29 starts, throwing nearly 171 innings, just over 170. He was incredibly durable. He was incredibly good. He was the Rangers' number one all season long, and he did the job he was asked for. The Rangers do not stick around in that hunt and have some hope for when Scherzer got back, or when DeGrom got back, or when Malley got back, or when this offense figured out how to hit again, which it never really did, without Nathan Eovaldi. They aren't going for it at the deadline without Eovaldi doing what he did this year. He is such a major impact on everybody on this staff. He is so important to this team, and I've talked about 15 different actually a little bit more than 15 different starting pitchers the rest of this week of guys who the Rangers could sign. I mean, there are the big names like a Corbin Burns, a Blake Snell, Max Fried. There's also other guys kind of the mid-tier of the market, Sean Manaea, Michael Wacha, or some guys you maybe buy low on, take a chance on, whether it's Walker Buehler or Roki Sasaki. All those guys seem well and good, but I think bringing back Eovaldi, that might just need to be priority number one for Texas in this offseason. He has been so important. You know what you're getting out of him, and you feel really darn good about him in a playoff start. I feel pretty darn good about him making 20 to 25 starts next year, somewhere between 120 to 150 innings. I think that is very, very important. I think him being healthy for the postseason, if the Rangers get there, or heck, even down the stretch in big games, he is so freaking good, so freaking important, that this needs to be the Rangers' top priority next year, this offseason. Guys, if they can only bring back one guy who's a free agent on this roster, I think it needs to be Nathan Eovaldi. And if it takes $25 million a year to bring him back, so be it. Now, where would that rank him in terms of starting pitchers? Well, he'd be in the top 5 of highest paid, top 10, excuse me, not top 5, top 10 in terms of highest paid starting pitchers, tied for 9th with Robbie Ray and Sonny Gray. They would be ahead of guys like Luis Castillo, Aaron Nola, Kevin Gausman, Chris Sale, even Yu Darvish, behind only guys like, Steven Strasburg, Jacob deGrom, Blake Snell, Garrett Cole, and of course, Shohei Ohtani. That is, I think, about where he should stack up. I mean, we'll see probably Blake Snell get back to around what he's making, which he's the only one who's going to be a free agent that's making more than this. I think we will see probably a few different guys that are signing free agent contracts in terms of Max Fried or Corbin Burns that will end up jumping ahead of that $25 million a year mark. So he might be just outside the top 10, but anywhere in that top 15-ish range of highest paid pitchers, I'd feel good about putting Nathan Eovaldi there. I know he is getting a little bit older. I know there have been some concerns about durability in the past, but with Texas, it's been pretty durable given his past. The Rangers have done a good job of keeping him healthy and getting him healthy for the postseason. This is a guy who there are not many pitchers that I feel much better about starting in a game 1 or a game 2 or any game of the playoffs than Nathan freaking Eovaldi. Coming up, we're going to look at the Rangers relief pitchers. The Rangers will need quite a few relievers because they have quite a few potentially heading out the door. Who should come back? Who should absolutely not come back? And a few hitters who are going to be free agents from the Rangers this season. All that and more right after this word from our sponsors. This show is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the #1 daily fantasy sports app, the best way to get on the action on most dates across the country. All you do is pick more or less on at least 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. PrizePicks, like I said, it's the best way to get in the action on most states, including California, Florida, Georgia, and Texas as well. PrizePicks puts its members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my pick hits, I can get my money in as quick as 15 minutes. So download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB to win $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Download the PrizePicks app today. Use code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks. Run your game. Now, the most free agents that the Rangers are losing this offseason are going to be relievers. The Rangers have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different relievers heading out the door, potentially in free agency. Top list is Kirby Yates, David Robertson, Jose Leclerc, Andrew Chafin, and Jose Urena. Now, David Robertson and Andrew Chafin can come back with options next year. Right now, Chafin has a $6.5 million team option, which, spoiler alert, I do not think the Rangers picked that up. There is also, I believe, a $7 million mutual option between David Robertson and the Rangers. I think there's a possibility that gets picked up next year. He is going to count $11.5 million towards the luxury tax. There are quite a few deferrals on David Robertson's contract, including $1 million from 2027 all the way to 2031. Not something that the Rangers have done a whole lot of. It's also going to count $5 million towards the luxury tax each of those 3 years. I'm not exactly sure how that math is mathing particularly at this moment, but that is what SpotTrack says, and I trust them to know a little bit more about this than I do. Now, of these guys, let's look at what they are projected to earn in free agency. According to SpotTrack, Kirby Yates projected to sign a 1-year, $6 million deal. That feels super low coming off of the all-star phenomenal season that Kirby Yates just had. Robertson projected for 1 year, $7.1 million. Jose Leclerc projected for 2 years, $9.2 million. That's $4.6 million a year. Chafin projected for 1 year, $4.5 million. And Jose Urena, 2 year, $6.6 million deal, $3.3 million average annual value. Now, how many of these guys do the Rangers need to bring back? Well, let's look at what the Rangers have in their pen options in terms of high leverage relievers next year. It's Josh Sborz. That's the only one that I feel confident about next year. There's also guys like Jacob Blatz, Walter Pennington, and then behind that, even Pennington, he had some moments. I think that he'd be a solid, low leverage lefty relief arm. I'm not too excited about it, but then you have to search a little bit harder for the next guys out there. Daniel Robert, Mark Church, Grant Anderson, if you feel great about those. Maybe Jack Leiter, Dane Dunning in long relief, or with Jack's case, maybe he becomes a high leverage, nasty late inning reliever. You'd much rather him be a starter, but at this point, it's the potential outcome. And then if you want to look in the minors, maybe Emiliano Teodo, if the Rangers want to just go ahead and bite that bullet and transition him to being a nasty late inning reliever. I think they'll probably give him the chance to start at least at the beginning of the season, hopefully a bump to AAA, see if he can get that command more reeled in, because if he is a starting pitcher, that is much more valuable in the long term. And then Skylar Hales, who has always been a reliever, is always going to be a reliever. I think he could be fast-tracked to the big leagues next season. Touches 100 miles an hour, solid relief prospect, but the Rangers need several back-end relievers. And in terms of guys who they just, I feel like, have to bring back, Nathan Eovaldi is at the top of this list. If Kirby Yates is going to sign a 1 year, $6 million deal, you do that so fast that I would make anyone's head spin. Yates was incredible this season, probably the second or third best reliever in all of baseball. I'd still pretty comfortably second, but Kirby Yates didn't allow any home runs in the postseason, so maybe you jump him over Emmanuel Clase. But Probably not. Clase had an all-time great relief season, but he is getting a little bit on the older side. This is just 1 year of him being dominant. Yates is going to turn 38 in March of next season, but 1 year, $6 million, I think makes sense. Something around what Chris Martin signed. Martin, a former Ranger, a Arlington native, signed a 2-year, $13.5 million deal at age 36 with Boston. He's been really darn good for the last few seasons. And he's been consistent in his older age. Didn't miss nearly as much time with injuries as Yates did. But if Yates is signing somewhere in the 1 year, $6 million range, coming off of a 1 year, $4.5 million deal, that was just, I think you've got to say, the best contract, most valuable contract, best value of any free agent signed last year. Yeah, I feel pretty confident in saying nobody got more per dollar than the Rangers did in free agency out of Kirby Yates, that 4.5 mil being the second best reliever in all of baseball. Incredible deal. Absolutely incredible deal. With Robertson, I don't think it as much comes down to can the Rangers convince him to sign back here as opposed to signing somewhere else. I think it comes down to, is Robertson ready to hang it up? Is he ready to be done with his baseball career? I think he's turning 40 soon, if not it's happened already. He'll be heading into his age 40 season. Turns 40 in April 9th of this next season. He's been in the big leagues since 2008. Maybe he wants to just go home to his farm and retire. Maybe that's the case. I'm not entirely sure, but I think the Rangers would love to have him back. I'm sure he enjoyed his time in Texas. He was so freaking good for Texas, one of two non-problematic options in the pen last year. And in terms of bringing Jose Leclerc back, now, I know there's been a lot of consternation about Leclerc. I think he has been blamed way too much for too many things and didn't get nearly as much of a pass as he should have after having the postseason run of his freaking life. I mean, he was incredible in that postseason. The Rangers do not win the World Series. Heck, I don't know if they make it out of the ALDS without Jose Leclerc having a postseason run. They definitely don't win the ALCS without Jose Leclerc having that kind of a run. But before that, I mean, he had 2 sub-2 ERA seasons. This year, I'm not going to lie and say it was a good season. It was a bad season. 4.3 ERA, too many home runs given up this year, about the same number of walks, a higher strikeout rate than the last couple of years, but more hits found holes, and he gave up late leads more often than you would like a closer to do. He was moved at 7th inning role, and he was fine. If this is your 7th inning guy, it's a pretty good 7th inning guy. $4.5 million or $4.6 million a year for 2 years. I think that's solid for a 7th inning guy. I feel confident in him staying mostly healthy. He's a reliever, so he's volatile. They're all volatile, but at that price, even if he blows up, it's not that big a deal. In terms of bringing Andrew Chafin back, no, absolutely not. Most unwatchable reliever I have seen in Rangers history. I don't think he's going to be that bad next year, but I don't want to do it. And for Arania, 2 years, 3.3 mil a year, maybe, if the deal makes sense. In terms of the Rangers hitters that are going to be free agents, there's literally just 2. There's Carson Kelly, projected for 1 year, 2.2 mil as a backup catcher. That's fine. Jenko, 1 year, 1 mil. Sure. Whatever. Fine. But in terms of guys who you bring back, I think if you can only bring back 2, I say Evo and Yates have got to be the top priority. I think you probably need to sign at least 2 relievers, if not 3, if not 4, probably just 2 to 3, sign 1 starting pitcher, and then the Rangers would still have decent money. So say the Rangers just bring back Eovaldi, Yates, and Robertson, all on those deals that they are projected to sign. That would be $38 million a year that the Rangers are adding to the payroll. And right now they have 93 mil in tax space. That is not including, I don't believe that's including the arbitration salaries of guys like Nathaniel Lowe or Jonah Heim or Leody Taveras or even Josh Smith, or actually Dane Dunning is also going to be up there in terms of, believe he's projected for around $5 million a year next year. It'd be around $75 million that they would have in tax space after you signed those guys. Right now they're sitting at 93 mil. in terms of their tax base, and that is including that 20 million player option for Eovaldi. So you add in those three guys, the 5 million more that Eovaldi will be making in that free agent deal versus the player option, plus the 6 mil from Yates, plus the 7 mil for Robertson. You have $75 million to play with. Say that takes off, I don't know, 30-40 million with the arbitration salaries. That's would still put you in the 35 to 45 million dollar range for other guys to sign. Save 5 million for the bench catcher, and say bringing back Jankowski or whatever else you want to do. You still have 30 to 40 million dollars. You could still sign one of those top end aces if the Rangers wanted to. They could still do that. They probably would be out of the Juan Soto sweepstakes, or if you have the ability to sign Juan Soto, if that's going to put you in the tax, the Rangers would find a way to get under the tax. I think Soto's probably going to make around $40 million a year. I don't think the Rangers are going to sign Soto. I think that's probably going to be the Yankees. It feels pretty clear cut. They're going to do anything they can, especially if they win the World Series with Juan Soto. They're going to cut a blank check for maybe up to, I think the baseline is $600 million right now. They might cut up all the way to $700 million, something stupid and crazy. But I think the Rangers need to be at least players in that sweepstakes. You need to at least make a bid, something competitive. But maybe while everyone else is focused on the Juan Soto, maybe they could go get one of those aces that I talked about, whether it's Burns, whether it's, Max Fried, whether it's Blake Snell. I'm not entirely sure exactly what they're doing this offseason, but I bring all this around full circle to say they do have room to bring back all these guys, or all the guys that they want, I should say, the main people that they want, and still be players in that top end of free agency and still be under the luxury tax, which I believe might be Ray Davis's number one goal for next season, more so than even winning another World Series. If they get there close at the deadline and need to add more salary and end up in that repeater tax, if he thinks they can really win it all, maybe they'll get there. But I say all this to say Nathan Eovaldi has got to be priority number one. Hopefully Yates loved his time here, and the Rangers can say, hey, we're going to fix this offense. We're going to fix whatever was wrong next year, bounce back. And hopefully you can be in those high leverage spots in a playoff game. And unlike Emmanuel Clase, maybe you can not give up that clutch home run and help the Rangers close out their second franchise World Series championship. That's going to do it for today's show. Thank you all so much for listening and subscribing all week long. And until next time, don't forget to enjoy World Series champion Texas Rangers baseball.